Hull sits on the end of the M62, the Silk Road of the Rugby League. As such, it has been more of a rugby town than one designed for football. In the early 21st century, that looked more prevalent than ever before. Hull were circling the drain of non-league football. Within a decade, however, they'd be celebrating on the turf of the Emirates Stadium, and no, not just as a one-off cup fluke, but as Premier League equals. This is how the biggest city to never play top-flight English football finally got it. Before we get into this video, book recommendation for you. Richard Gardham's magnificent The Decade, 10 years that transformed Hull City. Probably the best history of Hull City out there. Let's whiz through a quick history lesson on Hull City. Stop me if I go too fast. 1904, June, Hull City come into being as the latest club attempting to bring consistent football to East Yorkshire. Under management spells of names like Major Frank Buckley, Ray H. Carter and Bob Jackson, they are able to establish themselves as a willing second-tier team in the first half of the 21st century. Come the 1970s and the continuation of Hull's flip-flopping between tiers 2 and 3, a new general manager by the name of Cliff Britton wanted to inject some life into the club, so he hired 28-year-old Terry Neal to become player manager. Not much changed, not even when Tommy Docherty tagged on as assistant for a bit, as their most prolific frontman Chris Chilton left for the big leagues. Coventry, 92 grand. Then Terry Neal dropped the club like hot shit again for them big leagues, Tottenham, leaving Hull to promote from within when hiring John Kay. At first, nothing changed. Then a year into Kay's run as boss, Harold Needler, the man who had been bankrolling the entire operation, died. Sadly, his son didn't have the same passion for the club. Within 6 years, Hull dropped into the 4th tier of English football. As the city's two rugby teams met at Wembley in the Challenge Cup final, the football team was at its lowest ebb imaginable. In 1982, they went into receivership after Needler's Sprog decided to chip. The revival would be nearby. Don Robinson, now the chairman. Colin Appleton took them back into Tier 2. His successor, Brian Horton, delivered them to back where they belonged 2 years later. They turned players over like nobody's business to stay afloat, but they had a handle on their fortunes on the pitch. Mid-table in the 2nd tier, this life wasn't so bad. Naturally, Hull changed all of that by sacking Brian Horton, lobbing a load of money at a famous name in Eddie Gray, who decided to break the club's transfer record twice in one day, bringing in Ian McParland and Peter Swan. By 1991, they were relegated again. The churn would continue both in the hot seat. Stan Ternant lasted 62 games. Terry Dolan was gone after being unable to drag the club back out of the 4th tier after a 1996 relegation, and suddenly the club turned to the player-manager route once again in Mark Hateley. On the pitch, whenever a player showed any sign of promise, he had to be sold. Peter Swan to Port Vale for 300 grand and Andy Payton to Middlesbrough for 750 grand in 1991, Dean Windus and Alan Fettis for another combined $1 million in 1995, and Roy Carroll to Wigan 2 years later for 350 grand. All this just to survive financially. Attendances had bottomed out at 1,775, no wonder. They built the Deep a few years later. People were stuck without something to do of a Saturday. David Lloyd bought the club in 1997, injected a bit of optimism with that aforementioned hire of Hateley, but when Hull's reality was 22nd in the bottom division of the Football League and the new owner struggled to sell Bouverie Park, that optimism quickly dried up. First he called the people of Hull crap, then threatened to end football as a sport in the city. Thankfully he was given the boot. Unfortunately he still owned Bouverie Park, so he hung over the club like the wrinkly old ball bag he truly was. It left Hull to focus on the Great Escape.
And Horsfield's in here, and he can net the opener, and he has done.
Football League's bottom side were hardly expected to win at Scarborough, but Hull never looked back once.
Oh, that's a poor clearance. Beale with a shot. Oh, tremendous goal.
1999 was here. Hull City were utterly rudderless. 6 points adrift at the foot of the Football League. Warren Joyce was hired to snap them out of it. From 4 wins in 24 games, that all spun on the visit of Rotherham United on January 9th. From the remaining 22 matches, only 4 defeats were felt as the Tigers clambered into the safe surroundings of 21st place. 11 months later, with Hull still recovering and more than adequately placed in 16th with a decent brand of attacking football, Warren Joyce was simply binned off. When the name Brian Little was picked out, the complaints subsided as the Tigers placed 14th despite the continued financial mess the club were in. Well into the 2000-2001 season, Hull were still selling players purely to satiate a crippling tax bill. Looking at these results from the month of February 2001, you wouldn't have sensed much was wrong as Hull serenely breezed through the division, winning all 5, conceding just 2, thanks to the free transfer of goalkeeper Paul Musselwhite. Brian Little won Manager of the Month for February as the club were placed into administration for owing the Inland Revenue $500,000, giving a 2-week stay of execution by the High Court. March was better, well it couldn't have got much fucking worse, could it, as Adam Pearson purchased the club. He lent it some credibility, issuing the club money for a raft of signings to push Hull closer to the playoff picture as the brand new stadium was put back on the to-do list. Hull were not only herring towards a playoff but to automatic promotion as they sunk Chesterfield 3-1 to end April. Unfortunately, Chesterfield's 9-point deduction wasn't further punished, which seemed to nip Hull's spirit in the bud. Drawing the last 2 games ensured the Tigers had settled for the playoffs.
Still a chance. John Eyre, can he dink it? Onto his right foot, good shot.
Houghton, there's the header. Oh, it's a goal! Foot of Phil Pott, one of the substitutes that Brian Little's used up. There's a long range. Oh, what a goal!
To say it was a miracle that Hull City almost got promoted to the 3rd tier is an understatement. The momentum was maintained by a predictable heavy movement of players in and out of the club that summer. Amongst the new roster was Laurie Dudfield and Ryan Williams, who were acquired for a relatively eye-watering $600,000 combined. It wasn't enough as Hull's goals dried up by the turn of the year. Brian Little was unsurprisingly dumped in April and the club petered out into an 11th place finish. It didn't stop the big names filtering through to Boothry Park. Jan Morby was the next manager off the conveyor belt, who was tasked with toughening up the Division 3 team. He got 17 matches, 2 of which were won. What he did do was sign Ian Ashby, who would quickly become captain in his first season with the club. With names like Steve Coppell and Ronnie Moore being bandied about, the name you saw at the top of this video, Peter Taylor, was hired. Finally, the final stage of the rescue mission was enacted. Within a few weeks of his arrival, the KC Stadium was inaugurated, with 22,000 there to watch Hull belt Hartlepool 2-0. They still carried around that stench of mid-table, finishing 13th and 11 points off the playoff positions, but it was obvious that Peter Taylor needed a summer window under his belt. And with it, he acquired the goal-scoring prowess of Ben Burgess and Stuart Elliott. With them, the goal-scoring output increased to 82, and with that type of tally, there was every chance of a promotion push.
Sandy Dawson flips it in. Oh, what a goal! Elliott across to Burgess. He's got all up in the box. Goes to the corner. Oh, what a goal! Back. Richard Hines with a cross in. Elliott trying to get the header. Comes out to Ashby. Picks it back into Junior Lewis. Might come to Ashby again at the curler from Ashby. Oh, what a goal! Going into the penultimate game, Hull had the chance to escape from the 4th tier after 8 seasons in it. There were a couple of promotion 6-pointers, with Hull hosting Yeovil in 7th and 3rd place Huddersfield hosting 6th place Mansfield Town. Whilst 4th place Torquay hosted mid-table as fuck Kidderminster. Hull ran out 2-1 winners, who else but Ian Ashby with a late winner to finally take the Tigers back up to the 3rd tier. From Division 3 with its renaming, Hull would be a League 1 team in the 2004-5 season.
Disappointment. Shortly before half-time, Barnby struck for a 2nd time. Home City hero yet again.
Cutting inside the defence and providing Elliott with his 26th goal of the season.
And that didn't go badly either, as Hull capitalised on their momentum by bringing in talent like Nick Barmby, Aaron Wilbraham and Leon Court. Stuart Elliott continued to score goals by the bucket load, and the result was a comprehensive promotion immediately to the Championship, sealed well in advance by a tally of 7 points from Tranmere after coasting to a winless final 4 matches of the season. The campaign's backbone lay in the festive form that began with a 2-0 win over playoff hopefuls Brentford and didn't stop until the new year, factoring in 8 straight victories, the most impressive of which was 6 of the best hit beyond Tranmere, their closest promotion rivals. After 14 years out of the 2nd tier, Hull were surprisingly low-key in their transfer efforts over the summer. There was money thrown around for the likes of Stephen McPhee and Danny Coles, about $600,000 combined, whilst the free transfers of both Mark Lynch and Keith Andrews infinitely improved the team that had been added to with Craig Fagan in the February prior to promotion.
To a stroke of sheer genius from Stuart Elliott. Chances here, there's the cross deflected, oh, it's in the back by Davis, and now Ali Adier is off and scores his first goal for Wolves.
Given they're now lowly standing in the division they occupied, as well as Ian Ashby's season-ending knee injury early on, Hull had to be delighted with 18th place and a 10-point cushion to the relegated trio. Everything was going just swimmingly, then a call from above set to derail the lot. Alan Kirbishley's resignation from Charlton Athletic sounds a bit off topic, but it appeared all set to change everything 200 miles up the road. And that's because Peter Taylor believed he was heading down to the capital to the Premier League club. Instead, they hired Ian Dowie, got relegated, and Taylor found themselves in roughly the same part of town at Selhurst Park with Crystal Palace. Hull had many problems in the summer of '06, with their managerial issues appearing to be solved by the young Phil Parkinson, who had masterminded Colchester United's batshit promotion to the Championship. Then there was the sale of Leon Court to Crystal Palace, reuniting with Taylor at a record sale of £1.25 million. With that money came a raft of signings from Michael Turner and Dean Marnie to Sam Ricketts and Michael Bridges.
It goes low, and Barnsley have pulled a goal back. Thornton strikes him, Thornton has scored.
Gregory was in the manager's chair, and Gregory started with a win. Martin Rowland's cross began.
Things could have been going better. Besides the death rattle that was a 3-day double win over Leicester and Sheffield Wednesday, Hull had been winless and completely rudderless in the league. After yet another defeat on October 21st to Preston, Adam Pearson sacked coach Frank Barlow, replacing him with a man they were calling Phil Brown. He came recommended by Parkinson, who had looked to stave off some worries the club had with a 3-2 win at Southend on Halloween. But just as quickly as he had bought a house and moved his family up in November, he was gone by December. Conceding 9 goals in 4 days to Colchester United and Southampton will do that to a man. In as brief respite came Phil Brown with the managerial hot seat until Hull could figure it all out. The club were only off the foot of the division because Southend United were a complete disaster, and Hull weren't far off that.
Feet twisting, Barnby let it go, and this is Dean Marnie!
Fagan, Parkin getting forward, Fagan might take Duff on, he does. Fagan gets past Duff, rolls it back, chance for Marnie! Oh, yeah! The ball into the box. That can create a second. It's Dawson with a free kick. Keeper's dropped it, and it's there!
Brown had been dragged through enough results out of Hull to get the club safe, and it also helped that he was able to pull off some quite attractive attacking performances, no finer than in his first win at the club, a 4-1 demolition of promotion hopefuls Cardiff on December the 16th. The following month, with the snapping of Nick Barmby's Achilles still ringing in everyone's ears, Dean Windass was brought home to Hull. In spite of players dropping like flies either to injury or like John Parkin to sales to other clubs, Hull edged out of the threat of relegation with 1-1 draws against Colchester and Stoke before Dean Windass' winner at Cardiff on April 28th coincided with Leeds' drop points at home to Ipswich. Hull was safe. With Phil Brown's job now a permanent one, there couldn't be a summer without some sort of upheaval as Paul Duffin became the club's new chairman and Adam Pearson left the club. We were now back in unknown territory. It didn't mean the end of spending money or bringing in superstars, as Caleb Folham was made Hull's first £1 million player and Phil Brown borrowed from his former employer Bolton to bring in experience by the names of Henrik Pedersen and JJ Okocha. 50-1 to win the league was a throwaway line that I'm going to throw here, but Hull made it look anything but throwaway.
Back to Okocha. Clips the ball, it's a lovely ball in Pedersen!
Decent ball in again, looking for Wright Phillips!
At the back, Michael Turner and Wayne Brown were manning a tight ship. Up front, the club had been further enhanced by the loan acquisition of Fraser Campbell from Manchester United. In the sanctity of mid-table on Christmas Day, Hull had treaded lightly with their league form, often following up a victory with defeat and keeping themselves safe but without the threat of any real kind of form. Then those losses turned to draws, the wins became more frequent and Hull began the charge up the division.
Comes to Fagan, Pedersen, and it's there! Trying to play Litka in, here's Fraser Campbell, Campbell's away, Campbell, it's there!
Watford got everybody back. It's Marnie putting it in. Turner. Oh!
A January loss at home to title contenders West Brom had been a good yardstick as Hull went down 3-1, but after some warm weather training, Hull wouldn't taste defeat on home soil for the rest of the season. When it came time to play West Brom again in 6 weeks' time, Hull were ready, dispatching the Baggies 2-1 at the Hawthorns before winning 7 of their next 10 to creep into the automatic places on goal difference. Yes, Hull City were 3 games away from the Premier League 5 years after hurtling towards liquidation. When the heat was on, sadly, Hull couldn't replicate this form from earlier on in the season, going down at Bramall Lane and Portman Road as Stoke got what they wanted to usurp the Tigers. Once again, Hull City were 3 games away from the Premier League.
Shot was blocked. Henderson, Ellington, Henderson! And Watford have got a lifeline. Dawson returns it well. It's Emirates header, not convincing. Garcia's there. He's over the keeper, and he's there! And Ricketts. It's a great ball in. Foden! Forward here, Richard Garcia. Still Garcia. Garcia! Nathan Doyle. Doyle! It's another goal for the Tigers.
Windass! Quite simply, destined to be from Dean Windass.
Hull City could boast 4, maybe 5 players with relevant top-flight experience, and 2 of them were decidedly ancient in Barmby and Windass. They were meeting a division that had boasted both Champions League finalists earlier that year. The howls of derision from the tabloids was completely predictable. Amongst a whole new team was signed, with 4 of those having previously featured in the top flight beforehand in Bernard Mendy and George Boateng, as well as Manchester City's Giovanni and Spurs' Anthony Gardner for a record £2.5 million. It seemed as though the rest of the country were begging Hull to outdo Derby and get single digits for points. They were sadly mistaken.
Giovanni. Gonna have a go! So caught sleeping and he's in here. Marlon King with a chance to make it 2, and does!
Not a bad effort. What an effort! It is Giovanni. What a goal! What a fantastic goal!
They were not only mistaken, but the rest of the country was dumbfounded. Outside of the footage shown you and outside of a 5-0 drubbing at home to Wigan, the Tigers were imperious, not only by their standards, but by Premier League standards. Only Aston Villa could match Hull's exploits in defeating both Arsenal and Spurs away from home in the 08-09 season. With West Brom beaten, Hull were joint top of the entire division with 20 points from 9 games. They were halfway to the cliched 40-point barrier for safety, although that amount of points hadn't been necessary to survive for 6 years now. With title rivals Chelsea and Man United to come, there would be another litmus test for the Tigers.
Lampard in towards Malouda. And back in again, and into the net. Finds Michael Carrick. Carrick for Manchester United. Touch Ashby inside of him. It's Mendy on the outside of the Sena. And it's turned in, it's an own goal. Ball. Oh, spaced over Steve Malbrong. That is brilliant. Ball now Manchester City, and it's Fabinho. Oh, the tricks as well, and the finish.
Even by Christmas Day, Hull hadn't drifted completely out of the reckoning for Champions League football, which sounds like something from the pages of a Football Manager 26 YouTube channel, really. Here the Tigers were, despite suffering from a distinct lack of wins, but still occupying Europe. Boxing Day, however, would change things. It gave us the iconic Phil Brand team talk on the Etihad turf that we all like to have a laugh and joke about now, but for the players it was the turning point on Hull's association with the top division. A clumsy piece of team bonding and an attempt to raise the standards, Hull would win just 1 game after the 5-1 loss in Manchester. Phil Brown was already accused of having his eye on the Sunderland manager's job, and now their form looks set to derail the entire campaign.
Here to Aaron Lennon, who scores. He's had a lively little cameo so far. Hooks the ball in dangerously, and it's in. Spring forward. It's Avanzo Alves. Is it his moment? It's saved. Tunchai to Lawrence. Shooting opportunity for Lawrence. Goal! Brilliant! Absolutely brilliant!
Brown attempted to plug the gap left behind by Dean Windass and by Paul McShane's recall to Sunderland with the £5 million signing of Jimmy Bullard, who had an imperfect injury record as of late. He was followed by Kevin Kilban and Kamil Zayat's loan being turned permanent. Not even the feel-good factor of Matt Duke returning from testicular cancer could anchor this sinking ship. A trip to Dubai didn't improve matters as Hull finally slid into the relegation zone with a loss at home to Stoke. The FA Cup predictably couldn't provide any solace despite wins against Newcastle, Millwall and Sheffield United, the club's first quarter-final in the competition since 1971, going the same way as it did back then, with defeat, this time to Arsenal. From European football in December, Hull had been shot down in May.
Well, the chance goal for Bolton for now. Matt Taylor with the effort, which was blocked. It's Greta Steinson. It's in. Danny Shitty. He's struggling at the other end, and Hull City are in, and they've equalised.
Hull got 1 point when they needed all three, but upon returning to the dressing room, there was some cause for optimism. Newcastle United had lost at home to Fulham. As a result, Hull City had the quote-unquote advantage ahead of the final day. On 35 points, they led Newcastle by a slender margin and had effectively relegated Middlesbrough. One look to the final day's fixtures, though, was enough to strike fear into Hull supporters. Champions League winners and upcoming finalists Manchester United were next, but some solace was the fact that they'd either play reserves or would play within themselves. In any event, Newcastle travelled to 6th place Aston Villa, needing to better the Tigers' result.
Decent effort, what a goal! Down to Barry. Oh, a little deflection!
For more films on 2000s football, click on this playlist here.